Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Red Chip Poker Podcast. In this eye-opening episode, we dive deep into the world of high-priced poker training content. Is that $3,000 poker course really worth it? Does a $14,000 boot camp really hold the secret to crushing high-stakes games? Or are we witnessing a resurgence of inflated promises and psychological tricks designed to justify sky-high price tags? Whether you're a seasoned poker grinder or someone considering their first big investment in poker training, this episode is for you. We'll dissect the psychology behind perceived value, explore the ethics of marketing and quote guaranteed success, and reveal the hidden motivations behind these premium price points. You'll walk away with practical advice on how to evaluate poker training content, spot red flags in sales pitches, and make informed decisions about where to invest your time and money. So buckle up and join us as we navigate the fine line between value and hype in the ever-evolving world of poker education. Let's get started.
What is up, guys? Welcome to the Red Chip Poker Podcast. The title of this episode is Royal Hustle. We're going to be thinking about the current climate of hyper expensive training content. I'd like to start with a flashback. Some of you may have heard of the poker PDF, Let There Be Range. This poker strategy book was launched quite a number of years back, and it created a little bit of a stir in the poker training industry. Not so much because of the quality of the content, but because of the price tag. Now, from personal experience, I remember that this PDF, a mere 80 pages or so, was being sold for $5,000 a copy. When I researched this online, it seems that there are differing ideas regarding the actual price tag. Some sources seem to say it was actually being sold at $1.5K. Other sources say $1.8K. For some reason, I distinctly remember this PDF being sold at $5K. So either I've remembered incorrectly or many of the sources online are inaccurate. But the one thing that is consistent here is that this is a very hefty price tag for an 80-page ebook. And it had a polarizing effect on consumers of strategy content. On one hand, we had players who were convinced that the only reason why it's $5K is because this was some of the most groundbreaking strategy revelations from high-stakes crushers that the poker world had ever seen, and that $5K is a mere drop in the ocean compared to the millions you're going to be taking from the poker tables after having access to the knowledge in this 80-page ebook. In the other side of the camp, you had players saying, I don't care who the author is. There is no way I am paying $5K for an 80-page ebook. Besides, many players had the opinion that the strategy in Let There Be Range was weak at best, and in many cases downright flawed. It's certainly questionable whether the strategy in that ebook matches up to a modern understanding of good poker strategy. Now, I'm not going to voice my personal opinion on the book. I really don't want to upset anyone. However, it is interesting that some sources still list Let There Be Range as one of the most influential poker books of all time. The question is, why was it influential? Was it influential because the strategy was so groundbreaking? Or was it so influential because everyone was fascinated by the apparent hyperinflated price tag on an 80-page ebook? It certainly triggered a lot of players' curiosity, and it certainly triggered a lot of discussion. I believe a lot of players used to use MSN Messenger back in the darker days of online poker. And let's just say most poker players' MSN Messenger had some sort of conversation about the Let There Be Range ebook and whether it was really worth the expensive price tag and what kind of groundbreaking strategy information might be included in such an ebook. Now, I think Let There Be Range was a little bit of an outlier. There were high-profile pieces of training material that were released after Let There Be Range in the way of video courses and books. And although some of these training courses would reach into the hundreds of dollars, it was fairly unlikely you'd be purchasing something with a price tag over about $1K US. But in modern times, we seem to be experiencing a resurgence. Imagine, for example, that I told you that I had a video training course. It contains a large amount of secret information about the game that even experienced high-stakes players and nosebleed players don't know about. And this training course is going to cost you $3,000. What would you say? If some of you are saying, where is this course? Let me sign up immediately. Let me just say thank you. I appreciate your faith and confidence. However, the course doesn't exist. I think that most of you might be thinking, I don't care who the coach is. There's no way that I'm paying $3,000 for a video training course. There's no way that the information can be that groundbreaking that it's worth $3,000. What if I told you I had a boot camp, teaches you all of the high stakes poker secrets you need to know, and the sign up fee is only $14,000? And you see, this is a great deal because I valued the content in that boot camp and it's worth way over 20,000 US dollars. And I'm giving it to you for 14,000 US dollars. Think about all of the money you're going to make beating high stakes. All you really need to do is just make this one-time, fairly small investment when you think about it in the big scheme of things of $14,000 to sign up to my boot camp. What do you think? Are you in? Once again, this could have some polarizing results. I'm sure there are some guys out there, where do I sign up? 14,000 isn't that much for me, and this must be groundbreaking, amazing information given the price tag. And we have the same second group of players. Are you serious? $14,000 for a poker boot camp. I don't care what you offer. I don't care who the coach is. This is not a university degree. There's no way that I'm paying $14,000 for this. And in modern times, we've seen a resurgence of training content with a price tag over 1K US dollars, well over 1K US dollars in some cases. And one of the questions is, why does this seem to have such a polarizing effect on consumers of strategy content? And one of the things I'd like to mention briefly is a concept that we can refer to as perceived value. And the way the psychology works for some players is that the more expensive something is, the more they perceive it as being valuable. To the point where you could put two identical objects on a table. For example, imagine I was selling you an iPhone and they're exactly the same. I put them both on the table and I say, this one is worth $700, iPhone 1. iPhone 2 is worth $1,400. Now, the logical thing to look at that is say, you know what? It's the same phone. First one's $700. I'm going to take that. But there's a percentage of people that are going to start gravitating towards a more expensive one. They think to themselves, there must be a reason why this second option is more expensive. There must be something that I don't know about that creates that higher price tag. So how does this apply to poker training content? Well, a certain group of players find themselves thinking along the following lines. If it's that expensive, it must be good. The Let Their Range ebook must be good. This poker video course for $3,000. Normally, poker video courses go for a few hundred. This one's worth $3,000. It must be amazing. It must be completely revolutionary and groundbreaking. Another thing that players might say, I would expect a 3K course to be better than a course for $500. It sounds logical, but there's clearly a disconnect in terms of the valuation of poker training content. Players value it very differently. In some cases, they might value training content based on their own opinion of themselves, regardless of whether that opinion is objectively true. I.e., I'm so good at poker that when I create a training course, it has to be worth at least 3K just because I'm so good. Objectively, that might not be true. That could just be a player's opinion of themselves. But because they have a high opinion of themselves, they put a very hefty price tag on a poker training course. Could also be a deliberate attempt to manipulate this psychological leaning towards perceived value, where a product with a higher price tag feels like it should be more valuable. In other words, if I sell my high stakes training course for $50, players are going to assume that it's a joke. This can't be any good. Why is this guy charging $50 for 20 hours of content? Whereas if I market that same training course, exact same videos, put a 3K price tag on it, wow, this content has to be revolutionary. Can't wait to get my hands on this course. What if also I add a guarantee to my course? I guarantee that after watching this course, you are going to absolutely crush high stakes. You're going to make millions. In fact, I'm so certain that you're going to crush high stakes automatically after watching this course that I'm going to offer you some type of money back guarantee. Here are graphs from 10 random players with a positive red line that show you how much money you're guaranteed to be making after watching this course and learning about the magic bullet that will crush any high stakes game ever. How do you feel about the course now? Perhaps a little bit conflicted. On the one hand, you're not sure because of the high price tag. On the other hand, look at those red lines. This is basically your path to financial security for the rest of your life. And all you need to do is pay $3K or maybe $14K to sign up for the bootcamp, and it must be valuable. Look at that price tag. Plus, guaranteed success. It's guaranteed. Let's just think about the ethics of that for a minute. Guaranteed success at high stakes poker. Financial security for the rest of your life. What do you think? Is it okay to promise a magic bullet when such a thing doesn't actually exist? There is no magic trick that you can use to crush a poker game. There's no overnight revelation that can suddenly turn you into a crusher. Yet poker courses seem to promise that. That's why their content's so expensive. Sure, if you buy that $50 course, you're not going to get the magic bullet, but buy our course for $14K. Now you're going to get the magic bullet. Financial security for the rest of your life. No one can promise that. Poker is a tough game. Even if the quality of training material is very high, two players will still have different results in a high stakes context. Certain players may absorb the material, they may understand the principles of it, they may understand the underlying reasons behind a certain piece of strategy content. They may be able to use that information to perform very well. Another player, they just don't have what it takes to be a winning poker player. Their mindset's not geared in the right way. They're not fully grasping these strategy concepts on a fundamental level. You cannot guarantee success at poker. But we see many training courses either directly guaranteeing success or indirectly guaranteeing, with a myriad of different rising red line graphs and stories about how players have made millions under the tuition of that specific course or that specific bootcamp. So another very similar question, is it okay to guarantee success at high stakes? Even though you can't really ever guarantee that. Is it okay to guarantee that so that you can then raise your price tag? I.e., this course is realistically worth a few $100s, but now that we've promised everyone who takes this course that they're going to have success at high stakes, is it now okay to charge $10K for this course? Because we've overpromised on something that we can't promise. It's impossible to promise or guarantee success at high stakes. Another related thing to think about, is it okay to aggressively market your poker course to non-poker players as a way to make money? So we have signups from all the legit grinders, but we want more. We want more players to buy into this idea of financial security and purchase our poker course, even though they've never played a hand of poker before. Is it okay to start marketing these high-ticket training courses to people who have no knowledge of poker, but now they're being presented with this idea that looks like a great way to get rich very quickly? It's guaranteed, according to the advert, and it's not that difficult. We just have to follow a simple, predetermined system that's been fine-tuned based on algorithms, expert analysts, and data-driven strategies. This is basically a win-win for everyone. How can you refuse? What do you think about the ethics of that? Poker might not be for everyone. Gambling addiction could be a real thing. It's very important to be careful who we market certain ideas to, and that we're realistic in the way that we promise what we're delivering. Just to give you a simple example of this, looking at the Red Chip Poker main page, there's absolutely nothing that promises you a magic bullet or that you're going to get rich. What we see advertised, simply an A to Z poker course in a structured way that allows you to patch your leaks and expand your game. That's exactly what Red Chip Poker is. This is a good example, in my opinion, of what you should be doing. And this is why the main objective of this episode of the Red Chip Poker podcast is just to advise you to be cautious. We're not saying that every piece of expensive poker training content is a scam. What we are saying is that you want to evaluate the quality of the content on its merits rather than assuming that something's good just because it's expensive. There is, of course, a very slim possibility that a piece of content is so good that it's actually worth $3K a pop. If so, great. But there's another darker possibility, and that is that the author is not really enjoying as much success from poker as they claim. They're not taking enough money off the tables, so they want to take money off you instead outside the tables by implying they have some kind of groundbreaking magic bullet to crushing any high-stakes poker game ever. And I know from experience, as someone who does watch training content from time to time, I see that many of these big ticket training items are essentially a rehash of existing poker knowledge. virtually zero new information, repackaged in a way that makes it look like it's more valuable than it is. And in some cases, I see fundamental strategic errors in training content that's very expensive, even from some high-profile names out there. The basics have not been discussed accurately. There's some fairly glaring errors. So really, the recommendation is to exercise caution, not to assume that there's no fresh content out there. From my own personal experience making content, although I occasionally resonate with ideas that I first see in other pieces of training content, for the most part, I'm an independent researcher. So generally, if you're watching my content, a decent amount of the content is going to be fresh content that you won't see elsewhere. But then again, that same content doesn't necessarily come with a $2,000 to $3,000 price ticket. Red Chip Poker have recently released the Deviate course, and there are many concepts in that course that are not discussed in any other poker course. There are population exploits you can make use of that are not discussed anywhere else, and you can access the entire course for a monthly Red Chip Poker Pro subscription. Could we change that? Perhaps add some pictures of some winning red line graphs? Perhaps make some kind of vague statement such as Red Chip Poker members make millions and then place a $3,000 price tag on the course? Well, yeah, probably could do that, and it would possibly even sell. In fact, the scenario I'm describing is something that actually happened to me. I created a course for a training site a while back on how to make use of a certain piece of tracking software. And to be fair, there was a decent chunk of original information in the course. If I had been selling the course on my own personal site, I probably would have put a price tag of perhaps $200 to $300 maximum on the course. Whereas this particular company really marketed the course heavily. They slapped a $1,000 or was it $1,500 price tag on the course. They marketed it as a revolutionary masterclass, pictures of graphs, the idea that you would almost definitely get rich if you purchased this course. And I wouldn't be surprised if they sold a number of copies the way that it was marketed. The interesting thing is the price tag they put on a single purchase of the course was more than the entire cost of the delivery of the course. In other words, they paid me less than they actually sold a single instance of the course for. I sometimes wonder if part of the mentality is if we have a very high price tag, then we only need one sucker to buy the course, and then we're making a lot of money as a result. We've already recouped our losses, and if anyone else buys the course, then it's just a pure free roll. The other viewpoint some sites may have is that because content has a tendency to get leaked, and especially high-priced content, we often find that if content is set at a reasonable price, it doesn't get leaked or shared as much. Whereas as soon as you sell your course for several $1,000s, it's going to get ripped. So it could be sites are pricing their content with that in mind, i.e. if we sell it for $3,000, there's probably going to be a group of 10 players who split the costs between them, and then they are going to share it with all of their friends. So let's at least charge a large amount up front before the content gets ripped. But then if that's the rationale behind the price tag, then what the site's really saying is it's not actually worth this amount of money. We're only doing this to try and protect ourselves against piracy. But then ironically, high price tags are what fuels piracy in a lot of cases. If a piece of content is priced fairly to begin with, it has a tendency to not be proliferated as much. It's less likely to get ripped. So keep in mind here, we're not saying that all training content is a rehash of other training content. What we're really doing here is advising caution. Keep in mind the following. There is no magic bullet in poker. If any course or bootcamp is promising you guaranteed success, take a step back and think about what the motives are. In many cases, it's just to boost their own sales, which means they don't really have your best interest at heart. Keep in mind the following also, the price of training content, a video series or a bootcamp or a PDF does not necessarily indicate the quality of the resource. So think about any other content you've seen from a certain coach or a certain author. Has it been worthwhile? Have you seen a positive impact on your results? Because if the answer is no, then the training content not necessarily suddenly going to be much better just because there's a higher price tag on it. Also keep in mind that just because a course or a subscription is priced fairly or at a seemingly low price, it doesn't necessarily reflect on the quality of the resource. There's some very good resources out there for free or at a low monthly cost, whereas there are some very expensive resources out there which don't really offer you anything new, and in some cases could even be damaging to your game because the advice is downright bad. the training industry is still very much the Wild West. I had thought that we'd migrated past the days of let there be range and arguably overpriced ebooks, but it seems we're entering into a new era of very, very high ticket content. And it really takes a discerning consumer to figure out which high ticket content is actually valuable and which is just some small part of a royal hustle. Well, I hope I've given you something to think about. Thanks very much for taking the time to tune in to this podcast episode. This was Coach Weasel, and this was the Red Chip Poker Podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. Hope you enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. If you're looking for something to listen to next, that's way less expensive than it should be for the value. Our classic book GTO Gems is now available on Audible. I co-wrote and narrated the entire book, and it's the best resource for getting an understanding of GTO poker without requiring a master's in math. Just visit gtogems.com/audio1, that's AUDIO, and then the number 1, or click the link in the description box. Enjoy that between now and the next episode, and until then, good luck out there and happy grinding.